12 AP Micro FRQ number 1. Steve Rail is the only provider of train service operating between two cities and is incurring a loss. Use incorrect label graphs show each of the following. All right. Here we go. So it's a monopoly because there's only one provider. Price and quantity. Downward sloping demand curve. Marginal revenue curve. Marginal cost. It is incurring losses. The loss minimizing price and quantity would be that they're producing at profit max. So that's the price. Bounce it off of the demand curve. And that's our quantity. So we know profit max is always where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And we are there. This is not only demand, it is your DARP. It's your average revenue and your price and your demand. Here's your marginal revenue curve. They want us to show the price PM, QM. They are making a loss, so let's just do an ATC like this. Here's your price. There's your average. That's what it costs to produce this good, and that's the price you can charge. Straight up, straight to the left. Show that area of loss. Shaded completely. I'm just going to leave it like that. The allocatively efficient quantity, labeled QC. Recognize that allocative efficiency is always where price equals marginal cost. So that's right here. This is your demand curve, but it's also your price curve, right? Here's your marginal cost curve at that quantity, and that price would be allocative efficiency. It looks like QE maybe they want us to do, QE there. All right. If Steve Rail raises the price above PM, would total revenue decrease, increase, not change, etc.? So recognize that Steve Rail is in the elastic section of his demand curve. If he's at profit max, let's make some sense of that real quick. Here's our demand curve. I don't want to do it up here because it'll be sloppy, but down here I'm going to draw a total revenue curve under this. What I do know is total revenue is maximized right where marginal revenue is, oops, that's terrible. Let's back that up. Right where marginal revenue goes negative, or where it's zero, where marginal revenue is zero, that is max revenue. Right there, where marginal revenue equals zero. If I was to go straight up from that point, wherever I hit my demand curve, that section of my demand curve would be unit elastic. Everything below that point would be inelastic. Everything above that point would be elastic. So they're saying if he raises his price above PM with total revenue, here's your total revenue curve. If the price goes up, total revenue would have to go down. Can we see that? If you're in the elastic section, and we can see he is definitely in the elastic section if he's at profit max, if he was to raise his price, his total revenue would fall. So we would say total revenue would decrease, and we would explain it just like that, that since Steve Rail is in the elastic section of the demand curve, an increase in price causes total revenue to fall. However you can say it better than me, that would be perfectly fine. All right, assume a per unit subsidy is provided to Steve Rail. Will Steve Rail's quantity increase, decrease, or not change? Recognize that we always answer these the same way. We would say that per units subsidies are treated like variable costs. Therefore, they affect the marginal cost curve. And quantity would increase. So I would make sure that I said increase first, and then I would done increase, comma, and then give the explanation right here, right? So just understand here that per unit subsidies or taxes always affect. Should I have said effect instead of affect? Effect, whatever. The marginal cost curve, right? It will shift, meaning that we think of our marginal cost curve as our short-run supply curve. So think about supply. If you were to give a subsidy, do we have more supply or less supply? That's kind of how I like to think of that marginal cost curve. So if there's a subsidy, it tends to incentivize more production. A per unit would shift supply to the right, right? So there would be more supply. Therefore, your marginal cost curve would shift to the right, and you would get a lower price and more quantity. Obviously, with what they're asking here is, will consumer surplus increase, decrease, or not change? If price goes down, consumer surplus has to go up, right? So what we do know is that when marginal cost shifts to the right, we would have a lower price, right? We'd still go back to profit max, but that would lower our price. When our price went down, obviously our quantity increased, right? When price goes down, consumer surplus has to go up. All right. D, assume instead that there's a lump sum subsidy is provided to Steve Rail. Will the deadweight loss decrease, increase, or not change? It would not change for the reason that lump sums do not affect marginal cost. And that is your explanation. They do not affect your marginal cost curve. Think about this. If you own a business and I just come up and I say, hey, like you own a coffee shop outside the school, kiosk or whatever. And the principal comes out and he goes, hey, Charles, I like what you're doing. I'm going to give you $1,000. Does that change my demand for coffee? Does it change the amount of money I want to pay my people? Doesn't change anything. It's just lump sum money for being in the industry and operating. So it would not affect my marginal cost. And therefore, marginal cost would not change. If marginal cost doesn't shift, quantity can't shift. If quantity doesn't change, our deadweight loss stays the same. Will their losses increase, decrease, or not change? Well, if I'm giving you money, right, obviously your losses would decrease because now you have more cash in hand. So your losses would go down. There you go. All right, guys, be safe. Take care. Bye.